I would also like to take this opportunity to mention a speech that you had given back in 2016 at the Oxford Union.
Almost everything was said already, all the lies, all the propaganda, and also some truth.
And I will say that that's probably one of the best speeches I have ever heard.
But I think that it's time to put an end to the masquerade.
And I say this as a debater, a college debate champion.
Anyone who builds one terrace in the occupied territories has no intention to go for the two-state solution, period.
Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Book Cafe podcast. In today's episode, we will be discussing the book entitled The Punishment of Gaza by Mr. Gideon Levy. And I'm extremely thrilled to have him with us in today's episode to talk about the book. So let's just dive right in. Gideon Levy, welcome to Book Cafe podcast. It's really great to connect with you.
Thank you, Omar, and it's really my pleasure to talk to you.
Absolutely. So Gideon, we will of course get to talking about the book in just a moment, but just before that, we here at Book Cafe podcast love to know about our authors just as much as we love to know about the books we're discussing. So as the host, I know exactly who you are, but for the sake of our viewers and listeners who haven't read the book yet and who may be discovering you for the very first time, do please take this moment to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. My name is Gideon Levy, as you rightly said. I'm covering the Israeli occupation in the West Bank and Gaza over 35 years now. I decided I'm working in the Israeli daily Haaretz, which is quite a respectable newspaper, daily newspaper in Israel, which is published both in Hebrew and in English simultaneously, which is quite a phenomena, and which gives me outlet to talk also to the world and not only to my fellow Israelis. I cover the occupation and I write also many opinion pieces. I'm a columnist in Haaretz. I was born in Tel Aviv. I never left Tel Aviv. I'm an Israeli 100%. Unfortunately, my views are usually reflecting a tiny minority in Israel, but this doesn't make my views less just, in my view.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I have to tell you about myself.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that introduction, Gideon. So I have to say that the Punishment of Gaza, it's a very provocative title, if I may say so. So could you tell us why exactly you chose the word punishment to be part of the title of the book? Do please enlighten us about that.
So first of all, we have to say that the Punishment of Gaza was published a few years ago, and it deserves an update now with the terrible war in Gaza. But on the other hand, when you think about it, nothing changed. Gaza is maybe the most punished place on earth. I can hardly recall a place which is so punished throughout so many years. The majority of the people of Gaza, 2.3 million people are living today in Gaza. The majority of the people of Gaza are refugees and sons and grandsons and great-grandsons of refugees from Palestine. So most of them are living in refugee camps of the UN, which until this very moment look terrible. It's one of the most heavily populated places on earth, and now it's being destroyed again. While we are talking now, in Gaza, Israeli jets are really destroying almost the whole Gaza Strip, which is tiny, really tiny. There are already whole areas in which not one single building remained. And it's still going on. The war is a very brutal and tough war. It started because of a very barbaric attack on Israel by Hamas. But this, in my view, doesn't justify what Israel is doing now in Gaza. And Gaza is punished again, if you want. Gaza was punished so many times in 48, in 56, in 67, in all kinds of raids and operations, cast lead, and other all kind of biblical names to all kind of brutal attacks by an air force who is fighting guerrilla group or terror groups who are very poorly equipped. And it's a big tragedy, a very big tragedy. Unfortunately, in the last 15 years, I cannot go to Gaza. I used to go there regularly, and I love this place. I love the people. But ever since Hamas took over in Gaza, Israel does not let any Israeli journalists to go to Gaza.
Absolutely. And if memory serves me right, you mentioned in the book that 2006 was the last time that you had visited Gaza. Is that correct? Yes.
Exactly.
Exactly. Absolutely. So you've shared a lot of anecdotes in the book, Gideon, and I must say that we won't spoil it for our readers who may want to pick up the book. But there is one interesting interesting chapter that you had, which was named after Caterpillar, the bulldozer company. Could you tell us about a bit about that particular chapter with regards to Caterpillar and what your intentions were for putting that in the book? If you could just help us understand that.
Yeah, Caterpillar is a big company for bulldozers. And Israel, in those years, not now, but in those years, Israel was using the Caterpillar bulldozers to demolish whole neighborhoods of Palestinians. And there was a movement which called to boycott Caterpillar because of the terrible, inhuman use that is being done in its bulldozers. I guess the owners of Caterpillar aimed their product not for uprooting people from their homes and leaving them homeless like Israel did in Gaza in former operations. Now, in this war now, there is no need in Caterpillars because the jets, the American Israeli jets, are doing the job in much faster and more brutal way. But the outcome is the same outcome. Again and again, Gaza is rehabilitated, and again, Israel is destroying it. It's a real human tragedy.
Absolutely. And you mentioned boycott in your answer, Gideon. So, as I recall, a couple of years back, you spoke very heavily about the BDS movement. May I ask, just for my own knowledge, how successful or unsuccessful has the BDS movement been with regards to the state of Israel? If you could help us understand that.
First of all, Omar, we are talking now in a turning point, or what might become a turning point in the attitude of the world toward Israel. There is a feeling that there is a new generation, mainly in the United States, but not only in the United States, which says enough is enough. And if so you can think that BDS put the basis for this. They were the pioneers. BDS did not have economical or practical achievements. Israel is still prosperous and very few companies are boycotting Israel, individuals. In terms of economy, it was not a real achievement. In terms of changing atmosphere, mainly in campuses, and mainly in campuses in the United States, I think BDS has quite achieved a lot, and the fruits we can see now. I thought, and I still think, that Israel should be taken accountable for the crimes of war throughout the years. And I thought, and I still think, that without punishing Israel, Israel will not change. And therefore, I believe that BDS is an appropriate answer to the crimes.
Absolutely. And of course, it is heartening to hear that there has been some progress made with regards to the BDS movement. And just coming back to the book itself, Gideon, as I mentioned that a lot of your stories have been documented. I believe you covered 4 years in the book, 2006, 7, 8, and 9. But as you rightly said in the beginning, that you have been doing this for more than 40 years, documenting, the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories. And again, once again, for my knowledge and for our viewers and listeners, how do regular Israelis view you as well as your views? Do they find it provocative, or do you ever feel that there's a threat to your life? How would you comment on that? What would be your take on that?
Look, Omar, in 2013, when there was another attack of Israel over Gaza, my newspaper hired bodyguards to guard me because it became really dangerous. In this war now, I feel very secure somehow. I don't know why, because I didn't change my views.
Mhm.
But by and large, as being a Jewish journalist who writes for a well-established newspaper, I cannot complain. I mean, my freedom of speech was always total. Nobody stopped me. There were here and there better periods and less good periods, in times in which people would curse me, attack me, even physically. But there are also those who think that what I'm doing is extremely important. So I cannot complain. The basic effect is that I gain full freedom of speech, both in my newspaper, on Israeli TV, where I appear permanently. I mean, at least once, twice a week, I'm also on TV, in panels. I cannot complain personally.
Absolutely. And in addition to your appearances on Israeli television, Gideon, which obviously we are able to view on YouTube, I would also like to take this opportunity to mention a speech that you had given back in 2016 at the Oxford Union. And if I may be allowed to comment, I will say that that's probably one of the best speeches I have ever heard with
Wow.
regards to this particular Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I say this as a debater, a college debate champion, because I used to do debating in college. But very briefly, could you tell us about that 2016 speech? What was the motion and how was it defeated, or did you guys win that debate, is what I would like to ask.
You caught me now because I don't remember. I remember the speech very well. I don't remember what was the motion, but I guess it was the one-state solution or the two-state solution.
Right, it was, yes.
It was, okay, so I'm right. It was a very, very meaningful evening for me. I lost, by the way, in the debate. I was in favor, obviously, of the one-state solution. I thought, and I still think, the two-state solution is a fiction. It will never become true. I'm not sure that anyone ever had a serious intention about it, but in any case, there are 700,000 Jewish settlers in the occupied territories. Without evacuating them, you don't have a viable Palestinian state, and nobody can evacuate them anymore. So I believe that the only alternative now is the one-state solution, namely one person, one vote between the river and the sea, not free Palestine, but a free democratic state for both peoples. As with total equality, we are more or less the same size now. There are about 7.5 million Palestinians and 7.5 million Jews between the river and the sea. And I see the only solution for the long run. For the short run, it will not work. But for the long run, the only solution will be to live in a secular democracy. We are very far from there. Anyhow, the speech in Oxford was remarkable, first of all, because, you are in Oxford, and it has something in it. I did, by the way, something very similar also in Cambridge. But what is so funny about those speeches that you forget about them, and years after, all of a sudden, they become viral. And then comes Omar and asks me about the speech, which is almost forgotten. But yes, I highly appreciate what you said about it. It was important for me as well.
Absolutely. And as you rightly said, I actually saw that speech 7 years ago when it first came out, and then again in 2023. And if you look at the comments on that video, you'll find that everybody who made a comment on that video kept saying that this is still so relevant in 2023 as it was 7 years back. So yes, absolutely wonderful speech, and I encourage everybody who's listening or watching this podcast to definitely go and check it out. I would like to, Gideon, as you know, that our show is based out of Dhaka, Bangladesh, and I wanted to just very briefly touch upon another book because we are, after all, a podcast about books. So I have in my hands a book named Surrender at Dhaka, The Birth of a Nation. And this was written by a man named Lieutenant General J.F.R. Jacob. And let me just put it in context. General Jacob was a Baghdadi Jew who was also an Indian citizen, but he was also Bengali by culture because he grew up in West Bengal, one of the provinces of India, which shares cultural ties with Bangladesh. By any chance, did you know about General Jacob and his achievements with regards to the Bangladesh Liberation War in 1971?
Unfortunately not, but I do now anything possible to read about him. At least the background is so fascinating. I mean, both being Jewish and all the other details you mentioned, it seems very interesting, but I never heard about it. Sorry.
Okay, no problem at all. So very quickly before moving on to the next section, I'll just give one last point about General Jacob. One of the motivations which I had for conducting this particular episode with you in particular was to actually show our audience in Bangladesh that despite all the difficulties that the region is experiencing, there is a fine line between being being anti-Zionist and being anti-Semitic, and of course we have to ensure that we are very careful never to go over to something which is anti-Semitic. And so, as a lay historian, I always try and educate, or at least tell my own countrymen, that our country was liberated by a Bengali Jewish officer, and his supreme negotiation skills. For anybody who's interested in the history, do please pick up the book. It was him alone that negotiated on behalf of Bangladesh and the joint Indo-Bangladesh forces to ensure that the Pakistani occupying forces capitulated. And if you check out the Pakistani literature, military literature, till this day, everybody in Pakistan agrees that General Jacob was single-handedly responsible more than anybody else for the liberation of Bangladesh. And so it's just a small story that I thought that I would just share with you. But thank you so much for your thoughts on that, Gideon. I would just like to touch upon another book which I have behind me, entitled On Palestine. And this was written by Noam Chomsky and Professor Ilan Pappé, whom you also know very well.
Sure.
Yes, absolutely. So Professor Chomsky seems to be more in favor of the the two-state solution, because he feels that if you can take people out of Gaza, the Israeli settlers, you can do the same with the settlers in the West Bank. But Ilan Pappé, I believe, has the same view as you with regards to the one-state solution. So hypothetically speaking, Gideon, suppose that there is a one-state solution, democratic for all. But the end game, as far as I can understand, is that the Israeli regime definitely wants to have the land without the people in it. So do you ever feel fearful that, even if the one-state solution exists in theory, the Arab population may still be expelled from it? What would be your thoughts on that?
Danger, unfortunately, is not only existing, but even getting stronger and stronger those days. Talking about Gaza, the discourse about Gaza in Israeli public opinion is right now extreme like never before, really radical and cruel. And the danger is there. And the only solution is really the international community. It's all depending on the international community. Right now, it seems that the international community will not enable this in any condition. And when I say international community, it's unfortunately first of all, the United States, but not only. I don't see them enabling this. But my fear is that under a cover of a terrible war, which can happen any moment, not a local war like this war now, but a regional war, under the umbrella or under the darkness of such a war, a transfer might take place. And then we will really, or as the Palestinians call it, the second Nakba, the second catastrophe after 48. I'm very worried about it. It might still happen. We don't have enough guarantees to prevent it.
Mhm. Absolutely. And once again, Gideon, I would like to ask you another hypothetical question, and this is just for my knowledge and as well as other people who may be wondering about the same thing. And I will juxtapose it by just giving an example once again from Bangladesh, that in 2017, as you know, the Rohingya Muslims who were in Rakhine State in Myanmar crossed over to Bangladesh because there was a genocide and ethnic cleansing that was going on. And the Bangladesh government, they did whatever possible to try and ensure that the refugees within Bangladeshi territory are kept safely from harm until they have an opportunity to be repatriated someday. Hypothetically speaking, given that Israel has an existing peace treaty with Egypt, for the people of Gaza, and again, this is just a very crazy solution. If suppose Gaza went back under Egyptian sovereignty, would that help to mitigate or bring any changes to the killings that we're seeing on the ground? What would be your take on that?
There are, first of all, practical problems. Egypt doesn't want it, and that's enough. Egypt doesn't want it and will never want it. They don't want Gaza. They never wanted Gaza. Let's also remember that Gaza is Palestinian, not Egyptian. The people, the culture, the habits, even the accent is Palestinian, not Egyptian. And Egypt faces so many problems by itself that I'm not sure that Egypt deserves also to solve also the problems of other peoples when Egypt is facing really existential problems of hunger and unemployment and growth and economical problems. Really, I don't see them agreeing to this. But there is another factor, and that is that the Palestinians in Gaza are part of the Palestinian people who mostly lives in the West Bank, in Gaza, and in Israel, except for the diaspora. And they would like to be connected with their fellow Palestinians, and they have the right for this. By putting them in Egypt, you kill all their dreams about self-determination. What will they be? A neighborhood in Egypt? Egypt is over 100 million people. What will 2 million Palestinians, what will their life look like? In any case, I don't think it's relevant because the Egyptians will not let it happen.
Absolutely. And just once again, for my knowledge, Gideon, as I recall that during the 1948 Nakba, the Egyptian occupying forces were in control of Gaza. And if memory serves me right, they were extended Egyptian citizenship. And I recall maybe one documentary where the people of the West Bank and Gaza assumed that they were Jordanians and they were Egyptians, and they didn't actually have that connection with each other. Would you say that, obviously because the current government in Egypt doesn't want the Palestinians, but if hypothetically there was a change in government and they were more willing, would that be a practical solution to try and, mitigate what we're seeing on the ground, even if it comes at the cost of self-determination? And then,
look, Israel would be delighted from this solution because this is pushing the problem to others' hands. But I'm not sure that it will work. Don't forget that in 48, there were few tens of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza, and today there are 2.3 million. The fact that there are 2.3 million people gives it a different proportion, and a lot of poverty, and most of them refugees. Again, Israel would be very happy about this solution, but I don't think it's a practical one. I also think it's not a proper one, because you cannot disconnect the Palestinians of Gaza, even though they were disconnected. You are totally right, but only for a short period of time, from 48 to 67. in historical terms, it's nothing. Finally, they are connected, attached to Palestine, not to Egypt.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, thank you for that, Gideon. We'll take your answer as it is. We're pretty much getting to the end of our episode, Gideon. And so just before we let you go, I would just like to ask you a couple of staple questions that we have on the show, because as I mentioned that we are a podcast about books in the title. So the first staple question that I would like to ask is, are you more of a fiction person or a non-fiction person? What genre of books do you enjoy reading?
Totally a person of fiction,
Okay.
because non-fiction, I have enough in the newspapers. I read so much non-fiction. I read so much documentaries, I mean, in terms of journalism, essays, articles, that when I sit down with a book and start to read it, I want to get disconnected. Just don't give me more books about the Palestinian problem, about Israel, about the Middle East, because I have enough of it. I want to go to different places, different worlds, different tastes, different smells, different realities, different people, and not again and again to be really covered with the same issues all the time. So for me, reading a book is an outlet, is really a way to break away.
Right, absolutely. So in other words, it's an escapism. So fiction is
Exactly.
what that's how you
Absolutely.
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 For sure. And so Gideon, if anybody wanted to improve their knowledge of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, are there any books that you could recommend for our viewers and listeners to look through?
First of all, the best way is to come over and is to watch it in your own eyes. I recommend it to you in person and to your listeners and viewers. There's nothing like seeing in your own eyes. No book can explain you such a complex reality, because it is a complex reality. I would recommend maybe one book which gives you the right perspective about the Palestinian problem. And this is The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problems, written by Benny Morris. Mm-hmm. I think that's, for me, it was the basic, because he describes what happened here before 48 and throughout 48, when the state of Israel was established. What happened to the Palestinian people? And everything starts there and everything will end there. And if we think that we can deny it, we Israelis, we are damn wrong. And therefore, this book is so important in my view.
Okay, that's very interesting. And we will definitely have the name of that book in the description, Gideon, and thank you so much for recommending it. Just staying a little bit with Mr. Benny Morris, Professor Morris. As I recall that him and Professor Ilan Pappé were actually had two contrarian truths about what happened in 1948. I believe that Professor Pappé, in his book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, believes that there really was an ethnic cleansing, whereas Professor Morris believes that it was in the fog of war that they sort of, there was no conscious ethnic cleansing. Would you agree with Professor Morris or with Professor Pappé? Where do you stand on this? I could just ask.
Look, I think that you can overbridge both, because the outcome is very clear. There was a systematic ethnic cleansing. Was it planned systematically ahead of time? Or was it a kind of ongoing policy? I'm not sure it matters a lot. The outcome is the same outcome. And it was systematic. Because you cannot just say it was, under the war, here a village, there a village. You can see that there are certain areas in Palestine which were totally, went through a total ethnic cleansing in the south of Israel, for example, while other areas, the Palestinians were allowed to stay. So you see that there was some policy. And above all, we are dealing with a national tragedy. Almost 420 villages and towns which were totally erased, nothing left, so nobody can even find their ruins. And 600,000 people who had to flee away and are refugees until this very moment. This is a national tragedy that Israel never faced itself with its own responsibility. And as long as we will not at least face it and recognize it and realize it, there will be never a solution.
Absolutely. And I think that's extremely well said, Gideon. Thank you so much for that. And so just one final question, Gideon, and I promise I'll let you go. We spoke about Bangladesh in the middle, and I remember that for the longest time in Bangladeshi passports, it was written that this passport is applicable for any country in the world except Israel. And I also recall that after 1971, Israel was in fact one of the very first countries to recognize Bangladesh. With full respect to our Palestinian audience, would you also like to see Israel and Bangladesh establish diplomatic relations someday? Or do you feel that the current climate does not warrant it and it should be something that should be deferred for the future, for the far future? What would be your take on that?
Look, I truly believe that diplomatic relations should be between all countries. I mean, I don't understand what it is. I mean, you can criticize, you can raise your voice, you can be against, but to have diplomatic relations must be a basic. And most countries in the world have now diplomatic relations with most countries in the world. By the way, I understand that there are some more countries who have such a passport. If I'm not wrong, the Iranian passport is valid, not to Israel, obviously, and there are some other. I think that maybe also the Pakistani passport. I'm not sure, but right. My guess is that Pakistani.
Yes, you're right. Yes.
Okay. So, and with Pakistani people, I had some contacts here and there and interviews, and I asked myself, why I mean, I totally appreciate if you want to criticize Israel. Israel deserves it. But not having in other words, to make a long story short, I would love to see an ambassador from Bangladesh in Tel Aviv. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And of course, we will, hope for that day to come. And perhaps in the spirit of General Jacob, maybe that could be a starting point. Okay, so for our viewers and listeners who have been with us all this time, thank you very much for staying till the end. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're watching it on YouTube. You can also download it on Apple, Google, or Spotify. The book, once again, is The Punishment of Gaza by Gideon Levy. Gideon, my thanks to you again, sir, for appearing on the show. You've been a wonderful guest, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. And the pleasure is all mine. I'm sorry for hounding you so much for this particular interview, but I really feel that it was worth it, and I really learned a lot from you, and I continue to learn from you every single day. So thank you so much for your time.
No, Omar, let me correct you. The pleasure was not all yours, it was also mine. Thank you so much for having me in your really wonderful podcast.
I now look to Gideon Levy to close the case for the proposition. Hear, hear.
First time in my entire life that I don't belong to the opposition. And this says something. Almost everything was said already, all the lies, all the propaganda, and also some truth. But I think that it's time to put an end to the masquerade. And the masquerade is going on now for at least 50 years. And the masquerade contains two assumptions which both are a pure lie. A, that Israel has intention to go for the two-state solution. Israel never had an intention to go for the two-state solution, not even for a single moment. It is really almost historical irony to see now official representatives of Israel coming and defending the two-state solution. What did stop you for 50 years to go for it? Why did you go for it? What are you waiting for? Why didn't you go for it? And if this is not enough, anyone who builds one terrace in the occupied territories has no intention to go for the two-state solution, period. And there was not one single Israeli government who stopped for one day building those criminal settlements. And that's the best proof. And all the rest is a masquerade. Now, the second lie is that the one state doesn't exist. Ladies and gentlemen, the one state exists now for 50 years. The only question is, what kind of state is it? Is it a democracy or is it an apartheid state? That's the only question which is still open. Those who established the settlements project declared it very clearly. We are going to build settlements in order to prevent the two-state solution. The State of Israel always supported this project, officially, unofficially, by money, by political support, by military support. Israel, entire Israel, not only the settlers, is part of the settlement project. And the settlement project has one goal: to prevent the two-state solution. That's the only goal of the settlement project. And obviously also some kind of real estate interests. Nothing more than this. So to claim today that Israel is in favor of the two-state solution, and to claim today that that's the only solution. I was a great supporter of the two-state solution for decades. Many of your arguments here were my arguments for decades. By the way, in those years, you were perceived as a traitor to be in support of the two-state solution. All those who speak now about two-state solution 20 years ago say the two-state solution is Auschwitz borders. Now, when the two-state solution is impossible, then they come up, because they know that it will never happen. Now they come up, even Netanyahu can say two-state solution, why not? Even most of the Israelis will say it in polls, why not? Because they know that this train left already the station and will never be back. Because nobody is going to evacuate 700,000 settlers. And without evacuation of 700,000 settlers, there is no two-state solution. These all kind of Bentustans, all kind of other solutions, but not a real solution. Sorry. So, no. I need to solve here an occupation of 50 years in 10 minutes, so you'll take 2 minutes out of me. Guys, it's not about peace. It's not about symmetria. There is no symmetria. Forget about symmetria. Don't speak about symmetria, because there is no symmetria. I would even suggest that there is no conflict. Was there a French-Algerian conflict? There was a brutal French occupation in Algeria, which came to its end. And there is no Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There is a brutal Israeli occupation which must come to its end one way or the other. One way was the two-state solution. One way was the two-state solution. It's a fair solution. Israel did anything possible to destroy it in an irreversible way. And now we are left only with the other alternative. There is no third way. And the one state is now 50 years old. In the front of it, there is a democracy for the Jewish citizens of Israel, with many cracks. And now with our new elected defense minister, we'll have even more cracks, but we can still claim democracy. The second regime is to our Palestinian citizens, to what we call the Israeli Arabs, who gain some kind of civil rights, but are discriminated systematically. And in our backyard, in our dark backyard, there is a regime which is today by far one of the most cruel, brutal tyrannies on earth, not less than this, and I know what I say because I cover it for 40 years. And this regime cannot be defined but as an apartheid. Two peoples live on one piece of land. One people has all the rights in the world, and I'm talking now only about the occupied territories. Two peoples share one piece of land there. One people has all the rights in the world. The other people has no rights whatsoever. It looks like apartheid. It talks like apartheid. It is apartheid. And nobody can contradict it. Nobody who had been there. Nobody who is fair enough to look, go to the Jordan Valley, see the prosperity in the settlements, and then go and see the Palestinians who live there without electricity, without water, without any rights. And then tell me if it's apartheid, or you might invent it another title. This must come to its end. And not until the Israelis will be ready for it, and not until the Israelis will overcome all their fears and complexes and memories. This must come to its end because it's now a third generation of Palestinians who live under it, and this is unacceptable in the 21st century. And the only way to end it is to start to speak about equal rights. Because the settlers won, and the settlement project, as criminal as it is, not recognized by one state in the world, including Micronesia, the settlement project won in terms of quantity. 700,000 settlers, as I said, irreversible. So now we have to discuss what is the alternative. And the alternative is a new discourse of equal rights. And then I want to hear from Israel, what is the answer of Israel? Why not equal rights? Because we are the chosen people? Because God promised us something? Because we are better? Because we deserve more? What reason can an Israeli official give to lack of equal rights on this piece of land? And we have to get to the core of it. And the core of it is equality. Not peace, but equality. And the day that the Israelis will realize and recognize that the Palestinians have exactly the same rights as they, but exactly until the last inch, this will be the day that things will be solved. And then all those descriptions of civil war and this anarchy and Ireland and the one state will not work, try them. Give them equal rights, first of all. And you know what? By the end of the day, nobody can guarantee anything. Nobody can guarantee anything, sure not. But when I steal your car, I am not in a position to put conditions for returning the car. First of all, return the car. And the only way to return the car is now giving equal rights to the Palestinians. And the last sentence. I'm an Israeli. I was born in Israel. I even perceive myself as an Israeli patriot. I care about Israel. I belong to Israel. I'm attached to Israel. And now the Israelis are horrified. One state is the end of the Zionistic dream. It's the end of the Jewish state. So first of all, I must tell my fellow Israelis, end of the Jewish state? Where were you? You could have your Jewish state in the 67 borders for years with a very clear Jewish majority if it is important for you. For me, it's less important. I don't know what does it mean, a Jewish state. I know what it means, a just state. I know what it means, a democratic state. I don't know if the UK is an English state or British state. I know the UK is a democracy, and so must Israel be. And when I say democracy, it's not only for one people. It's not only until a certain geographic border. Democracy like pregnancy. Either you are pregnant or you are not. No third way, unfortunately. Either you are a democracy or not. And when you have this tyranny in your backyard, you are not a democracy, period. And for this I'm fighting, and for this feeling of belonging to a just place, which I don't, of feeling of being proud of my country, which I'm not. For this, the only way, unfortunately, it's not a simple way. Don't tell me about the difficulties. I know them better than you. But the only way that Israel left open, the only way that Israel left open is to start to speak about democracy, about equal rights, about a one democratic state instead of a state which has this tyranny in its backyard. Vote for us. Thank you.